This is the Entrepreneur on Campus podcast. Let's go. On each episode, we talk about a new industry or market, including the entrepreneurial opportunities, the pains, and the surprises of that industry. Listen, the business world is so broad, and we are here to dissect all of the different ways that entrepreneurs make money.
Software, you make it one time and sell it 1,000 times.
E-com spaces, man, those things sell for like an 8x multiple. It's ridiculous.
Three main ways that we make money, and the primary one is actually ad sales.
The goal is usually to exit within 3 to 7 years.
I'm your host, Matthew Brown, and I've created this podcast to help you discover hidden opportunities. Thank you for tuning in, and here is today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneur on Campus podcast. I'm excited to be here with Jeremy Willden today. Jeremy, thanks for hopping on with me.
Sure, thanks a lot.
So I'd like to introduce you guys a little bit to Jeremy and his background. So Jeremy Willden, he started in technology at a very young age and encourages youth and kids to enter STEM careers. He anticipates potential problems early in the design cycle, saving time and money during project development. He spent 5 years with National Instruments, the maker of LabVIEW software and measurement hardware. His work ranged from complex analog and digital mixed signal designs to managing the, I don't even know how to say that word, oscilloscopes engineering group. As time went on, he moved to presenting new technologies to thousands of investors, industry analysts, and customers at the annual NI Week convention. He was involved with RF and wireless product and manufacturing test systems development with MaxStream, enabling increased throughput by a factor of 10 while improving quality and lowering the manufacturing cost of the products. These improvements were a key factor in the acquisition of MaxStream by Digi International. Jeremy is the co-founder of Constellation Labs, an engineering consulting firm providing for the technical development needs of many companies in the Silicon Slopes region, across the country and internationally. In addition to professional product development, he's an avid maker, building multidisciplinary projects for fun. An early adopter of the Raspberry Pi and other platforms, he leverages low-cost, powerful platforms deployed globally to develop and grow the Internet of Things. As you guys can tell from this bio that I just read, Jeremy has had vast experience with engineering and product development. So Jeremy, we're excited to have you on. Thanks for being here today.
Sure. Thanks, Matt.
So when did you start Constellation Labs, Jeremy?
Back in about 2013, my partner Martin and I were doing consulting work for various companies. We had gone through some startups, most of which hadn't panned out nearly as well as we'd hoped. That's the flip side of the startup world, of course. Sometimes they don't take root and grow the way you'd hope. But we started doing that consulting work individually and found that we were engaging with a lot of the same customers. So it made a lot of sense for us to create just a common organization. We've continued to bring in additional engineers since and have, depending on the week, 10 to 12 people working as much as full-time on various client projects and products, and another 10 or 12 in the wings working part-time now and again.
Gotcha. And are you currently focused full-time on Constellation Labs?
Completely. Only have a very few side projects that have persisted over the years, but they don't take very much of my time. So we pretty much work exclusively through Constellation Labs now.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that this is a business that is based nationally and internationally. Do you have clients just globally, or how is that?
Yeah, at different times we've had clients, none currently in South America, but have had some there previously. We've done work in various places in Europe. The bulk of our clients are right here in the Wasatch Front in Utah, but we still have several that persist across the country. Just a couple of weeks ago, I flew back to upstate New York to work on site with one of those clients for several days to help them get their product out the door.
Very cool. So I'm kind of curious, are you guys targeting mostly mid-sized companies that have the budget to develop products, or are you trying to help startups? What's your kind of target demographic?
We'll develop products for anybody, whether they're small, large, well-established or not. The client in upstate that I had flown back to was a very well-established company. It's been around for more than 50 years, and they're simply trying to branch out into new high-tech products that are outside of their existing product families. A lot of our clients, though, are, of course, startups. I mean, sometimes it's just a single person with an idea that needs a little help with the technology side of their concept. They have an invention, an idea, if you will, and we try and give them guidance. But most of all, we try and make sure that they can do the work without us later on. We're not like a regular firm where we're trying to pull people in and force them to work with us forever. We actually try and work ourselves out of a job and give them the skills they need to continue to do the work. Especially if our team got hit by a bus or something like that, we want to make sure that they're enabled permanently and aren't left hanging.
Awesome. That makes sense. So tell me, what industry are you in?
Really, just about any kind of technology product development. The bulk of our team comes from the embedded systems world, wireless devices, Internet of Things, basically connecting something to the internet that hasn't been before. Writing a mobile app or a web interface to interact with those devices. But that certainly hasn't limited our range and scope. Many of the projects we can't talk about because of non-disclosure agreements, but one of the more extreme end of the technology spectrum that we worked on was a project for Utah State University. They have a lab where they have genetically modified goats. I know, stick with me, sounds sci-fi. Where they've crossed goats with spiders, and the goats produce spider silk proteins in the goat's milk. And we built the machine for them, a new generation of a machine. They had some sort of prototypes earlier on, but we built them something, fills a couple of banquet tables, and it takes those proteins, extrudes them out into a very thin fiber, and then the rest of the machine stretches, forms, measures the tension, the thickness. It has a video microscope and large touchscreen displays all across the top so you can see the entire process of manufacturing artificial spider webs.
Wow, that's incredible. It's crazy how many new available technologies are coming out. Mm-hmm. And that's so cool that you're on the forefront of that. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, on the other extreme, sometimes the products are really very simple. One of the other ones we can talk about publicly is just a little guide light, basically a night light that's built into the faceplate of an outlet. Wonderful little startup here in the Valley was working on that. They had a patent on it, but they needed some help getting it through. And it's really a very simple kind of system, but working with the regulatory agencies that govern things, the safety approvals and things like that was a little bit trickier. And that's an area where we were able to help quite a bit. So again, a small, simple product, and that company is flourishing, doing very, very well.
Very cool. What would you say are some of the pros? Maybe give me 2 pros and then 2 cons of being in the industry that you're in.
Oh, and yeah.
I would also include maybe consulting, right? Because you're always taking on new projects. I imagine you have deadlines. It might be somewhat stressful. Mm-hmm. Give me an idea of 2 pros and 2 cons of that.
Absolutely. Probably one of the best pros is we get new, interesting projects all the time. If you are kind of worn out on a project, in a lot of companies, you end up working on the same 1 or 2 or 3 things for years and years and years until you either change companies or change careers. And we get new, interesting things all the time. And because we're training the client to continue on, there's very little risk of us getting bored with a project at any point. Really, sort of a separate pro really is that I just love all kinds of technology. So I'm always working on things that are interesting and fun. And it's fun to get to tell people what I can about the projects that we're working on, because a lot of the times it does sound like something out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
On the con side, the scheduling part of it is sometimes the biggest trick. Some clients will come in, they just have a nascent idea and they want to know how long a project's going to take and how much it will cost to develop it. but they don't even know what the product really has to be quite yet. So it's hard for us to estimate that and give them that answer before they really know what it is. And we found in virtually everything that we work on, it changes as we go along. Therefore, sometimes their moving targets make things a little bit tricky. Another can be a con. It's very important that you're self-motivated when you work as a consultant in just about any industry, because if you're not working for a client, you're not getting paid. Again, on the pro side, working from home is great and a lot of fun, makes the commute really short and easy. Yeah. But at the same time, it makes it too easy to get distracted if you're not careful and focused. Having a separate space to work, in my case, a few rooms of the house that are fully dedicated to the business, really helps a lot. Well, and we even have some sort of travel trailers, not a regular camping trailer style thing, but more like a utility trailer with lab space set up in them that we can take on site. Gives you a nice separate space, a place to keep the projects organized. But again, if you're not careful, you don't want to let your personal life bleed into the work life too much. And on the flip side, because you're getting paid for your time, sometimes there's too much of a temptation to pick up the phone late at night or something like that. And it makes the significant other unhappy if you're working too many hours a day.
Sure. And so I imagine you've had to find a balance over the past several years that you've been doing this to determine how much to work, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I know a lot of companies like yours that do consulting, they get a lot of their business through referrals. Is that one of your primary sales channels, or where do you guys primarily find new customers?
We're completely by referral. We haven't done any advertising to speak of. We've gone to a few trade shows and similar events, but really no advertising in the traditional sense of the word. Part of the reason that works so well for us is anyone who refers us business, and this is good for anyone out there. If you have a client or whatever, contact us and refer work to us. And every quarter we send out bonus checks to people who've referred business to us. We send a percentage of whatever we make from those clients. And that has continued to bring in business for us quite steadily over the course of the growth of the company since 2013. So I guess pushing 7 years now.
Wow, that's awesome. And that speaks volumes to the type of work that you guys do if people are willing to refer you. So you guys do all types of, it sounded like Internet of Things. It sounds like you do some software development as well. Are there things that you guys try to stay out of?
Yeah, anytime we are approached with a project when we don't have all the expertise in-house, we will do our best to find somebody else that we can align them with, or at the very least, give them the best advice we can as far as the pitfalls that we're aware of. Perhaps it's somebody wants to do a complete desktop software application, or they want to build something that is just purely a mobile website. Yes, we have developers in-house who have done that, but it's really not our core focus. So we'll try and help get them with an app development company or with a pure desktop development software company. Usually we fit a little better when there is some type of hardware component, a wireless component, an Internet of Things component. That said, that Spider Silk machine didn't necessarily have quite all of those components on the software side, but it very much on the hardware side was a good fit. All of that automation hardware was a good fit for our team. So it made sense to do that. If something's a pure industrial design without any electronics inside it, we'll probably refer them to some firm that's just purely industrial design. But if it has that plus some technology component, we love to dig in. Yeah,
that's great. So let's say that one of my listeners is working on some project. At what stage would you recommend them to come into Constellation Labs? Because do they want to try to get as far as they can on their own and try prototyping a little bit first? Or at what stage do you advise your clients to come and join with you guys?
Certainly you want to have some reasonably well-formed concept of what the product or the idea is. Beyond that, we've had people engage with us everywhere from they just have the idea. They don't even know how the technology needs to happen, all the way to they've already been to another firm. They've done 1 or 2 rounds of development and things simply haven't worked out. And they really need us to sort of pick up the pieces and fix something that was fundamentally flawed, or maybe just put the final touches on something that was already pretty well along. So we'll talk. We'll have a video conference. We'll take people out to lunch and discuss what they do and try and get a feel not just for their product idea, but how they're planning to structure their business. While we don't give business advice per se, we have done enough business development work, both directly and indirectly, seen it done well and seen it done poorly, that we can warn about some of the pitfalls as far as how to structure their, not necessarily corporate structuring, but how to build and organize their business so that they can be most likely to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. That's great to hear. Can you give me an idea of kind of your pricing model? How do you guys choose how to price the projects that come to you? And then is that I'd be curious to know just kind of how the money flows throughout your company.
Yeah. So the many companies that do what we do have a fixed bid pricing model, you might say. So they're approached with a project. They go and try and do their very best to come up with what they would call a bid or a quote for a project. And that is a great way if you have, it's a great model for both sides. If the product or project is very well scoped, has a lot of detail already worked out, they already know exactly what the feature set needs to be, the platform that it's going to run on, and all of that. 95% of the projects that we interact with aren't scoped that well, are going to change a lot. And frankly, they don't necessarily know how even to get started on something like that. So they don't have the background to do that sort of estimation and platform planning. So because there are so many companies that exist that are already doing business that way, we decided to structure ours a little bit differently. We don't do fixed bids or quotes. We do purely time and materials work. Now, we create an estimate for every project. We'll spend time with our client trying to figure out exactly what it is they want. And half the time, we're reading between the lines. They say, we'd like it to do this, and we figure out, well, that infers about 6 different other, or we have to infer from, it implies there are different features in there, different platform choices that they probably don't even know yet. And we do our best to estimate that. But because it is a moving target and it can change, we'll engage on the basis of its time and materials. Whatever time we spend, whatever costs we incur, they're simply going to pay for directly. However, we're working so closely with them. It's not like the fixed bid project where we go off and work and come back a month or 2 later with a finished product. We're working so closely with them, training them so closely on how to continue to develop their product family down the road. It's a very close partnership. So they're generally much more comfortable doing a time and materials engagement with that than if we were just going off and working without a lot of interactive integration.
Yeah, they have an eye on what you're doing. They understand that you're not just wasting their time, right, and getting paid for it, but that you're actually working on their projects and developing what they need.
Yeah, and along those lines, from the background of how Constellation Labs came to be, we built that top level, this top level company, Constellation Labs, as a separate. It's its own LLC, and each of us who work within the company, we aren't employees of that organization. We actually have started our own independent businesses, our own LLCs in most cases. We are all technically self-employed. There are 2 big reasons for that. Number one, we're not tying down our engineers. We're not making them be exclusive. Again, other consulting firms, they're generally tied down. They're not allowed to do outside work. In our case, we not only don't restrict it, we encourage it. If someone approaches me or another engineer in the company and they have a small project that really only needs just my skills or just that engineer's skills, we encourage them to just connect directly there. Don't even take it through the Constellation Labs company in that case, because you don't need anybody else's efforts. It's completely fine with us. So we're all really running our own independent, separate businesses, and that allows us all to choose what type of health insurance we want to buy for ourselves. Now, we're all employees of our own LLCs, so we're all still, we still get a paycheck based on how our own individual companies are doing. And it all still comes back to, are we working actively? And that comes back to the work ethic and actually staying on task all the time.
Very cool. So you own Constellation Labs, and you said that you have one partner with you, right?
Yep.
And so let me just try to understand. So all of the employees that you have, quote unquote, they mostly have their own LLCs, and they own their own consulting firms, and they take on contracted work from Constellation Labs frequently. Yeah. That's one of their main clients.
Yep.
We'll say. Okay.
Yeah. And the top level company itself, we have taken great efforts not to have it be a company that's going to become in and of itself inherently valuable. It doesn't make a lot of profit. It's really just collecting some money off the top in order to pay those commissions, the thank you referral bonuses, cover some extra things like some liability insurance that help protect all of us, and some of those kind of accounting and overhead fees. So the company itself at the top level doesn't become, something that we could all sell and try and retire on. We really live by the sort of live debt-free lifestyle thing, kind of espoused by Dave Ramsey. He's one of a lot of our favorite guys as far as living debt-free. And it's kind of slow and steady, save up, live below your means, and instead of trying to come up with the big payout all at once, which most of us haven't had much luck with in the past, or just hasn't panned out the way we would have hoped.
Sure, that makes sense. So game plan, long-term view, would you like to stay doing this consulting work for the next 10, 15, 20 years? Yeah.
That's so much fun, the work that we get to do every day. Even if a pile of money landed in my lap today and I didn't have to work anymore, I'd keep doing, for the most part, what I do every day anyway, because I enjoy it so much. I might work slightly fewer hours, and my wife might be a little happier about me helping with the home improvement projects a little bit faster. But for the most part, it's just a lot of fun. And I guess that's one piece of advice I'd give to the young college students is hopefully you've chosen a major, some type of field of study that's something you're passionate about and that you love. Hopefully it's also something where you can make a career of it. But first and foremost, find something that you love and find a way to make it into a career. Otherwise, if you pick a major and a job based on what you think is going to make you wealthy down the road, you're probably going to end up not liking it after not that long a time. One of my brothers at one point, 10, 12 years ago, had a fantastic, really well-paying job. He was an executive assistant to somebody very high up in a very well-to-do company, and he was making, six-figure great income, but it wasn't his passion. And after a couple of years, he finally said, forget this, and he went back to things that he really enjoyed. And he was much happier afterwards, even though he'd cut his pay in half. That said, the consulting business in general, we make sure to price the work that we're doing so that it's a good value add to our clients. So for our really, really experienced engineers, yes, our clients are paying a very good hourly rate, but they're getting extremely good value for that time as well. Well, if we're not providing good value, we won't bill for the time. We'll put it down as this was some research or a learning opportunity for myself. You didn't actually have to pay for that, but it did help move your project forward.
Awesome. I love it. Love that advice and that philosophy. So you've been involved with this for about 7 years is what you said. Mm-hmm. And technology is changing like crazy. What are some of the trends that you've seen over the past several years, and where do you see some of these trends going over the next couple of years?
Predicting the future, of course, is always fraught with peril, right? I mean, look at what Back to the Future 2 thought about what 2015 was going to be like. Where's my flying skateboard? But at the same time, they didn't predict the smartphone. Yeah. Obviously, going very far out is fraught with peril. Clearly, higher levels of connectivity and automation are continuing to become a bigger part of our life. Along with that come the security risks of having that greater connectivity. there are entire fields of study that are just emerging now in terms of cybersecurity and things like that that are, it's tomorrow's job of the future, protecting against attacks that don't even exist today, and developing new products along those lines. At the same time, there's always a sort of eddy currents in our culture that represent getting back to basics. So ultimately, I expect to see things like a social media app to help people who want to do backyard gardening or farming. So it's a way to take advantage of technology, but helping us all to get back to basics, back to our roots, spend more time and connect as people. Remember, social networks really started as a way to connect, and sometimes they devolve into something that it becomes just a platform for bullying and exclusion and show-off kind of behaviors. But at the same time, they were ultimately, or I hope, originally intended to help us connect as individuals. And whatever it is that you're doing, if there's a component that helps you connect with other people and form relationships, those ultimately are the most impactful, most helpful kinds of technologies. They help us kind of keep and maintain our humanity. And I really hope that some of our online conversations and discussion forums, that they find technologies that help reduce the amount of trolling and mean comments that tend to show up in those kind of forums, and let people connect as humans more. Because I think that will bring the humanity back to the online platforms that we use every day.
Yeah, just improving human quality through relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So one question that I wanted to ask you is, maybe there's some people listening that are very interested in the product development side of things. What do you recommend? I mean, if you were back in college right now, a freshman in college, what would your career path look like to being able to do something like you're doing today?
The thing that I've found throughout my career, it started with an interview in college at BYU with a few different companies, but the first company I worked with, National Instruments, one of the things they focused their interviews on were projects that I'd done on my own outside of school. And I've always been kind of a project-y person. At one point, this is way back in the era of cassette tape players and the Walkman. So early 1990s, there were no MP3 players, anything like that. I saw a need to make the tape player's batteries last longer than the 2 AA batteries would make it work. And I kind of kludged together a switching power supply and a battery pack, a lot like a USB charger is today. So really what I get out of that is do some projects on your own. Now, a really good platform for that, and this goes a little bit back to your question about emerging trends. This one's no longer emerging, but if you haven't heard of the Raspberry Pi computing platform, take a look at it. If you're more into low-level electronics, maybe look into the Arduino development platform. But the Raspberry Pi, from its first version, it was a $35 computer that has roughly the processing capacity of a laptop or desktop computer 10 years ago.
Wow. And
it's $35. Now, yes, you still have to buy a USB keyboard and mouse and a monitor, but you can get an old secondhand monitor, something like that, at a thrift store for a few dollars, and maybe an HDMI adapter for it. The amazing thing about it, this platform, we use it a lot in real commercial applications. So many people see it as a toy, and it is a good maker tool, but it is a computing platform that can enable just about anything. So if, for example, my grandmother is not doing well health-wise, there is a small camera that I can put on top of the Raspberry Pi. I can put it at her house, connect to her Wi-Fi or internet connection, or the neighbor's Wi-Fi if she doesn't have it, and check in on my grandmother. So instead of spending whatever the monthly fee is and everything for one of those home security cameras, I can put that together as a project on my own. I've just spent $50 and I can keep an eye on my grandmother and make sure she's doing okay.
Yeah.
Or something like that, right? Do some kind of a project. If you're more of a software kind of person, yeah, you can probably just do a lot of these things on your laptop. You don't necessarily need the standalone hardware. But consider getting something like a Pi. Build some code on there. Learn more about Linux. It's a really great tool for so many things. It's nice not to have to put a full-blown computer there running Windows and deal with the reliability issues associated with a lot of the commercial operating systems.
Yeah, awesome. Love that. Another question I had briefly, and then we'll just go into a couple last questions. So what about let me see how to phrase this question. So let's see. You know what? I lost my question, my train of thought.
It's all right. Give me a stream of consciousness. We'll figure it out again.
It has something to do with for the aspiring entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is what it was. Here we go. Mm-hmm. It just came back. So you mentioned earlier in the interview that you had worked with some startup companies and they didn't work out in the way that you had imagined and that you wish they had.
Yeah.
Give me some insight to that. For these aspiring entrepreneurs, some lesson that you learned.
Here's the quick version of the story. So I was working at National Instruments, great company, consistently at the top of the best places to work lists of all of the companies. And it was fantastic. There were so many wonderful things about there. If you have an opportunity to work for them right out of school or elsewhere in your career, I highly recommend them. They're still a fantastic company to work for. But I was there working, doing product development and design right out of school a year or two. And there were a lot of startup companies in the Austin, Texas area that were snatching up a lot of engineers from National Instruments and other companies. In fact, half of the oscilloscopes group had been basically tempted away by another company in the Austin area. I was still pretty green, but they asked me to come over and join that group and actually be the group manager, which was very intimidating for me because I didn't have a lot of experience. But they saw enough seeds of being able to work with people well enough. I can't imagine why, because I'm pretty. I'm not that social. Let's put it that way. I'm a lot more so now. My wife's trained me on that. Thank you, sweetheart, for that. But they brought me over there, and that really sowed the seeds of startup. Restlessness, if you will. Oh, those guys have gone over there. They've gotten big stock options. They're all going to get rich and retire in 2 years. And then when an opportunity came to move back to Utah and join a startup here, it was very tempting. But what I didn't know at the time, and this is the thing, if you're looking at startup opportunities like that, especially if the company already exists in any form, the first question I should have asked but didn't really was, okay, you've offered me a certain number of stock options, but that was just numbers on a page. What percentage ownership of the company does that really represent? And what I ended up finding out was they gave me a percentage, but it was a percentage of the stock option pool, not the percentage of the whole company. So it ended up being about a factor of 10 different than what it was represented. So when the company finally did sell, yes, that factor of 10 difference popped back up again and ended up with less money from that than if I had stayed put and just kept getting stock options at National, because it was not to be to toot my own horn, but I was in the top percentage of the engineers. When there was a downturn and nobody was getting stock options, I was among the small percentage that still did because they really wanted to keep me there. And in retrospect, probably should have stayed around there longer. So that one didn't turn out so well. Went to another startup. In that case, I knew what the percentages were. Not nearly as high as they probably should have been, considering how early a startup that one was. And in that case, that startup just never really launched. It continues to operate, but it's never really become a successful business. It hasn't sold or anything like that. It was actually that helped push Martin and me to the point where we really wanted to start. At one point, it was because we just wanted to make ends meet and pay the bills, but it grew into Constellation Labs and has just been a fantastic place for us to work. We've gotten to build what it is that was was wrong with every other company we worked with, we have done our very best to fix that in the company we've built.
Yeah. So kind of to summarize with that, when you're going to do a startup, first off, it can be kind of risky because you don't know how well the company's going to do. Mm-hmm. And second off, be extremely careful with what kind of deal that you have, because it sounds like you kind of got gypped on that one. That company, it sounds like they're great and they sold, but you didn't get what you feel like you could have got from that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that advice. It was great advice for people who are interested in doing kind of what you've done.
Oh, can I throw one more thought out there too?
Yeah.
If you're starting your own business, I know it won't feel like a priority at first, but do get at least a little bit of legal and financial advice. Get a certified public accountant, find one that you can talk to, and make sure that the way you structure your business. I've mentioned that we've done LLCs, and that was right for us, the way we set them up, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right structure. You might be better qualified in your business to start a C corporation or an LLC set up as an S corp, something like that. But talk to somebody who's a professional in that area. I guarantee you, whatever you invest in their time, as long as you keep it reasonable up front, will pay back tenfold later on because you have structured things correctly. And we were pretty careful about that with the way we set this up to help all of us working within the company have a good experience long term. Well
said. What are your thoughts on starting a business in college versus becoming more educated first?
Well, my wife and I have been running businesses ever since we were first married, still in college, going to school, starving students in the apartments there. So, but the nature of those businesses it's varied over time. Anything from product distribution and sales until, of course, now really heavy duty technology development. There is definitely something to be said about starting a business while you're still in school. You're probably living in a very inexpensive apartment. Your living expenses are very, very low. Now, you may be starting a family, and that might be a little bit more expensive. You may have to work out health insurance or other things, but with some of the programs and potential subsidies and things available for health insurance, it may not be that difficult. And yes, you don't necessarily have all the experience that you have when you're later in your career, but it can be a really good time to start out, dip your toe in. At the very least, strongly consider doing a side business. Maybe start it up while you're still in school. Even if you take a regular day job with the career and all the benefits and all of that, try starting that side business. Do some side hustle, even if it's volunteering for somebody and getting some of that real world experience. You can accelerate your ability to become more like a consultant down the road if you take that experience earlier in your career. On the flip side, getting more schooling. For example, my partner Martin has a master's degree in engineering, and his experience has served him well there. I only got a bachelor's from BYU in engineering. In both of those cases, it wasn't so much the degrees after a year or two, it's what we learned on the job, the general skills, and the ability to learn new things. Like you said, technology is moving so fast. The most important thing you need to do is continue learning, picking up new skills and abilities. Otherwise, you'll end up kind of stuck or obsolete pretty quickly.
Right. Awesome. And then the last question that I wanted to ask you, and this is a question that I've just like to ask my guests just out of curiosity is, do you have some kind of morning routine? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, my routine is, it's a little irregular in a lot of ways. The main thing is I try and get up as early as reasonably possible. So my wife's a night person. I'm a morning person. That doesn't always work out so well. But she wants to stay up late binge watching the latest series on Netflix that we're hooked into or whatever. And I end up falling asleep halfway through, the latest episode of Madam Secretary or something like that. But have to catch up the next day at lunch. But by getting up early and doing things early in the day that otherwise slip off of my to-do list, I end up having a much more productive and effective day. Otherwise, I'm kind of looking at that to-do list, things that aren't necessarily key critical tasks, but are important. They don't have to happen urgently, but still need to happen. I try and get some of those off my plate earlier in the day, and it makes the rest of the day go a little bit more smoothly. And sometimes it's just get up in the morning, and if the to-do list isn't that long, it's maybe take a walk or read a book or something that's out of the norm from the everyday routine.
I love it. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure having you today.
Thanks so much, Matt. Sure appreciate it.
All right, we'll catch you later.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you guys again for listening. I love you. Have a good one.